And we are live. Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Wolf, and welcome to the second meeting of the Food AI Collab. I am very excited to have two great speakers here with me today. Uh, First off is Antonio Gagliardi. I hope I got that right, Antonio. And we also have Chris Young with us. And we're going to introduce both of them to you and what they do, and you'll get a good idea of that. This, like I said, is the second one of a monthly meeting we'll be having for this new group discussing the implications of how AI is changing the food system in all its different ways. And so I love that we're seeing all these different people chiming in on the chat side. So if you are joining us from an interesting location or wherever you are, just let us know in the chat. We also use that chat for questions during the conversation. So please, if you have a question for Antonio or Chris as we go along, drop it in that chat. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and hopefully we'll get to all of those. So let's jump into the conversation. Antonio, how are you today?
Good, good. Very busy day, but very good.
I
It's
love
like
that. I see behind you activity going on. Is this the Barilla, some sort of Barilla factory behind us?
yeah, it's one of the facilities. Uh,
That's awesome.
People and stuff happening. Um, yeah, pretty good. It's super cold in Italy today. It's like winter again.
Well, hopefully it'll be spring soon, and it's a nice day here in Seattle, and hopefully wherever you are. Let's introduce people too, because if people don't know about you, Antonio, let's tell them a little bit about what you do. I know that you work for Barilla. You work with the BluRhapsody team, which is the project around the 3D pasta printing, but you also are working with AI. But I'm sure you can do a much better job telling us about yourself. Tell us about what you do.
Yeah. So my background is in building engineering and architecture, but I always worked as a maker. So from the maker movement, so always worked with open source software or building machines to experiment with new materials or old materials to change how we manufacture them. I I started working in the food industry with the food innovation program, which was a master hosted by the Future Food Institute. And then I started working with Barilla, exploring 3D printing for food, and then we created this new brand, which is BluRhapsody. We are designing and selling 3D printed pasta, both on e-commerce and for caterings or chefs. I'm in charge of the computational design of the new shapes and everything about technology. We developed a patent on it and much more. Beyond that, I'm also working on data analysis or any kind of interesting technology that can be useful in the food industry. I'm a huge explorer of the field. Yeah, that's pretty
Great.
much. I don't want to bother
And
too much.
it's a great time. It's a great time to be exploring, I think, in the world of technology and that intersection with food. And you are doing that because I know in our conversation yesterday, as we were talking about what we're going to be talking about today, you talked about how you are training uh, LLM, your own LLM, or you're training an LLM on your own data to essentially create a second brain. I thought that was a great term. You're creating a second brain with AI. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So there is this huge trend around knowledge workers about taking notes, taking smart notes. And in the last 5 years, a plethora of new softwares, open source softwares, went live all around, even on cloud or that you can install locally. One of the most famous is Obsidian, but in my case, I'm using Logseq. So many softwares to take notes. The next step is that having LLMs that we can use, install in our own machines, so locally and completely privately. I started working and training small models with my own notes. So I can chat with them. I'm sure that I'm the only owner of those data. And then when I'm chatting, it's like talking to my past self. And so I changed how I take notes. Basically, when I take notes, I'm writing to my future self. And that's a great concept because you completely change how you take notes. It's talking to your future self, so you are giving advices, but also
Yeah.
you are structuring your thoughts around the future. So it's pretty interesting. And this actually in the last 2 months became much easy to do. So I feel that like in the next 2 years, maybe everybody will be can could have access to a technology like that to take notes and talk to an alternative version of themselves. And this opened up a lot of um, speculations.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. And I think this idea of a second brain, particularly as applied to your daily job, is really interesting. And so when I think about the intersection of AI and culinary, I can see how this could be incredibly valuable for someone like a chef or someone who's building a new food product. Talk a little bit about how you see this evolving. Do you think that this concept of a second brain trained around specific knowledge around your particular craft or your job is something that we're going to see, and maybe how specifically that could that play out in the world of culinary?
I think that right now knowledge workers are just a very strict amount of people. It's like an elite. But I really feel knowing a lot of chefs on many different levels, from a Michelin starred chef to a young chef that just started in a restaurant, they struggle on taking notes. There is really a huge problem on how you take notes of every recipe you experiment daily and how you structure your personal evolution in the recipes you are making. And so, as a professional chef, I feel that any chef should start today taking notes on a digital device so that he can be ready to add the LLM or AI features, whatever, even just on ChatGPT. Having an history chat in ChatGPT can help you a lot to funnel into your ideas, and having a digital assistant. Just this simple feature can make you a better person in general. And beyond that, uh, having private data and training on a chef's notes should be done very delicately in a way, because like kitchen, anything that has to do with food and recipes or restaurants, there is cultural aspects too, and in there are cultural heritage that everybody is bringing in their own baggage. So
Yeah.
even if I'm Italian, maybe I grew up in Spain, and so I started using tapas in my own recipes. Um, but it's important that my digital assistant is it's shaped on my own thinking, on my own history of recipes, because otherwise a digital assistant might suggest me to use a BBQ sauce to
Yeah,
add to
yeah.
my tapas. It's a cool idea. It's very divergent though, and it doesn't follow the cultural heritage. And we should work on humanizing more our AI experience, to not be too much neutral or far away from
Yeah.
our own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're kind of referring to there is essentially the when we talk about potential dangers of AI applied to food is this idea of biases. And a lot of it depends on what you're training it on, right? If I'm training a culinary AI and put only on American cuisine and it's getting loaded up on barbecue and stuff like that, and then it would completely ignore, like you said, the Italian heritage, or if someone's using it to get specific information about Japanese food. It just wouldn't provide that context. So that's really interesting. What are some other potential, I don't say downsides, or maybe downsides or dangers of like applying AI to food? How can that potentially be a negative impact as we apply it to culinary?
Well, first of all, still talking about LLMs, so semantic generation of new text, generative AI, we should say that general LLMs that are already available, like ChatGPT for a cloud one or Llama for an open source LLM, they are trained generally, so their output are never near your own taste or the human taste. They are trained around words. So there are some experiments going on around building LLMs that are more sensible to the uh, cultural but also sensorial, the sensorial aspects of food. Because if you ask ChatGPT to give you suggestions on how to prepare pesto, maybe it might have uh, divergent outputs, and it might miss the all the social part, all the cultural part of food. Beyond that, I'm sure that there will be more errors coming out or more dangerous situations. I really feel that we should experiment more. Everybody, privates, chefs, professionals, even food technologists, because those LLMs are trained on very generalistic data, and we need more experiments on that, on this side. Um, for example, in the food industry, in a more professional environment, LLMs are used mostly for initial thoughts. Like if you are doing long-term thinking, maybe, or just you need some more creativity on your table while working on new products or new developments. But it can become very messy when you are going going to something more concrete. If you want specific four recipes and you are working maybe on a cream and you want to that specific rheology in the dough or in a cream, it gets messy because LLMs are just generating words. They have no meaning. In that sense, I feel that, and I know that it might be some struggle on that, but chefs should get nearer to numbers and a little bit of code. Because if you already now, you can use ChatGPT with the interpreter mode. And there are many other AIs, even open source, that allows you to generate code and execute the code directly. That means that if you're working on a recipe, this digital assistant can help you reach that particular amount of foam, for example, in a cream or air inside the dough. You can work on the parameters, and
Okay.
chefs should get more easy on those numbers because it's not that hard.
Well, let's talk about that. So you are working within a big food company, you're working with your chefs and other people that are doing product development. One of the things I wonder about is, how a big food company like Barilla or another big CPG brand is going to get AI fluent. I mean, already they're employing AI in a number of ways. I'm sure you're working on some of those projects. But what are some of the ways you think food companies will use it in the future?
So let's still stay on the LLM side and generative AI. First point and first touch point, it's marketing. So any kind of campaign or text you want to generate or creativity you need, that's the easier part. And you can regenerate and you can faster your product development. Um, Secondly, still working on the LLM, you can retrain and fine tune an AI on your target data. And so, if your target is old people with munching, with dysphagia, for example, and you want to reproduce completely the past experience for people with dysphagia, how do you do it? Then you can have a digital assistant that I don't want to call it AI because digital assistant it works better for me on that.
Mm, mm,
So it can help you developing the entire communication approach, but also the product development approach, because you need to redefine recipes, product. You need to rethink pasta, maybe jellified pasta, so without wheat flour, semolina with flour. You just use whatever agar agar
mhm.
and this kind of process. I feel that is where the AI will be present in any food corporate.
So you think so part of it is ingesting that type of data because an AI just won't know how to recreate pasta for someone with like a certain type of tasting disability. How does it get from here to there where because I don't think like there's any general purpose LLM that would understand that type of information. You are essentially for your own purposes training an AI or an agent to do that, and then it'll help accelerate your own product development. What are the inputs you're building? You have a bunch of data around, for example, understanding
Uh,
different types of tasting dynamics, and then you input that into your LM, and then that can help you with building that type of product.
yes, this might be a possibility. There are many methods to fine tune any LLM on your data. So even if you just have a bunch of PDFs with market reports, for example, that are specifically describing your target persona, it's super easy to train the LLM on those data. So the answers will follow the data inside it. That's a first approach. On the other hand, on the mathematical points, so any kind of data you have, maybe sensory analysis and ingredients, any kind of scientific data that you gathered, there we should need to use really machine learning and AI to because the LLM is not so decisive at the end of the at the end of the day to reach the final product. Yeah.
That's great. Real quickly, if those of you in the audience have a question for Antonio, feel free to ask those. We'll also have a Q&A at the end with both Chris and Antonio. Antonio, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how a company like Barilla or another CPG brand ultimately has to view themselves 10 years from now. I generally don't think CPG brands have an internal competence. A food brand has an internal competence around things like AI. A lot of the entry points I've seen from Big Food is through joint ventures. We've seen companies like Kraft Heinz start to partner with AI specific startups to get into this space to do product development faster because they didn't have that muscle. So if you were advising a food brand on how to essentially build the muscle for AI competency, how would you do that today?
I have two answers on that. One is keep prototyping because testing and failing, it's still in 2024, it's one of the best ways to understand what are the limitations of technology, but also to train your own employees. And that's crucial. On the other hand, I feel that 10 years from now, any CPG, if they will be there anymore, it's that they will need to train managers to not be just managers of other people. So we will not have the people management problem. We will have the AI management problem. And me as a manager in 10 years, I should work orchestrating many different agents as my team. And this will be more efficient. It might be more focused on a specific approach or specific product. And imagine the amount of product development we might do at that point, because I will not need to consult with the legal team, with the technical regulatory team, or with the marketing team even. And in a way, it will be like having many different selves. It's like Fernando
Yep.
Pessoa movie, but
Many different agents versus many different employees.
Yes. I feel, and I've read many papers lately that are speculating about it. So the managers of the future will need to orchestrate different AIs to generate and keep the creativity on, because this will accelerate creativity. And this might happen in 2 years. I'm not talking about really 10 years. 10 years from now will be the standard.
That's fascinating, and then I think it has fascinating implications for management broadly, but also management within a food brand as you think about how you structure your organization and how you're going to have these different, uh, I guess, functional building blocks, and then how does the management structure work? And so, thinking of managing multiple AIs across different functional and departmental level competencies is really interesting. We do have a question from Aubrey I want to jump to real quick. Aubrey says they are curious to understand if you are using an enterprise LLM solution, and if not, how are you protecting your IP or intellectual property?
Yeah, that's why I'm training my own AI at home that never sees the internet. Basically, it's actually connected to the internet directly to my phone, but I haven't given access to the internet. Talking about corporate, if that's like corporate experiments, you can normally do it in any kind of compartmentalized virtual ambient. So it's not reachable from the external part. It's like having a cloud system in your company and you just use that LLM. Actually, even the biggest brands in LLM like OpenAI or Anthropic, they are hosting the compute power. But when you are talking as a company, as an enterprise, when you are chatting with your LLM, everything is compartmentalized and protected. That's already working.
That's already happening today. So one of the questions, we'll do one more question. We're going to jump to Chris Young, and then we'll have you both back. So one last question for you. Sandy Markle says that one of the biggest barriers to people who actually cook in the culinary industry is the essence. Let me reread that. One of the biggest barriers to people who actually cook in culinary industry is because, in essence, they are creatives. They don't want to tarnish their craft. What, in your opinion, can help them embrace tech solutions like AI to their creative process?
I really feel that wearable devices might break the barriers, because many chefs that I know really hate the screens. They are not digital natives in a way, but they are super creative, and they have always their hands dirty. So the first approach, there are already kind of 5 different products that are going on the market. One of the most famous that in the last 10 days were really ragged by reviewers was the Humane pin, which is like a pin you can hold here for many different reasons. Those are prototypes. So starting now, in 1 year, we will have real AI devices that any chef can use to take notes and talk to herself. And this will be powerful. So if you're interested in that, I can suggest you to search for 01. Is an open source wearable device that you can build by yourself. It's a great project. There are many different developers that worked on it in 1 month. They just launched it.
Interesting.
It feels powerful. I'm just starting building it. So
very cool. Well, hopefully we'll bring you back. You can show us your personal digital assistant there. I know that the human AI pin, like you said, has been getting a lot of attention. I think it's pretty expensive now. Very early days, people can check that out. But I think you're right. These little physical manifestations of what could be an AI will be interesting as well as we evolve this technology into the future. Well, Antonio, I want to thank you for chatting with me. We are going to put you to the side stage, and don't go away. We'll bring you back in just a moment as we bring Chris Young. So we'll bring her back. See you, Antonio. And let me bring Chris Young to the main stage. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Mike.
How's it going?
It's going very well. How are you?
Great. I watch a lot of your YouTube videos. And by the way, if you don't watch Chris's YouTube videos, you should check him out. He's doing lots of really cool stuff. My favorite one, by the way, Chris, was you figuring out how to make a 7-Eleven Slurpee at home, which I haven't done yet because I'm just afraid what it'll probably do to my countertops. But I recognize that background from your YouTube videos, and yes, got lots of cooking gear in the background, as well as Modernist Cuisine, which you co-authored, which that huge volumes of books there. So, folks, Chris Young, co-author of Modernist Cuisine, the seminal publication about marrying technology and cooking, as well as co-founder of ChefSteps and now Combustion. You'll do a lot better job telling people about your background, though, Chris. Quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Chris Young. I originally trained as a mathematician and a biochemist before bailing on a PhD and ending it up a little restaurant, 3 Michelin star restaurant called the Fat Duck Restaurant for 5 years, where I was their head development chef between 2003 and 2008, when I left to return to the States and co-author Modernist Cuisine with Nathan Myhrvold. After that, I founded what became ChefSteps, which started out as a food media company. As hard as it is to remember, this was the very early days of YouTube. There wasn't a lot of great food content on YouTube. And what we had learned from Modernist Cuisine was a couple digital cameras and a couple chefs could, create a big community. And we did, eventually getting into sort of the first generation of smart IoT products with the Joule sous vide circulator, which at the time, I think was, and maybe still is the most connected cooking appliance, where we had, millions of cooks happening every month and having all of that data. So and now I run Combustion Inc., which is also a smart cooking company where we make a wireless thermometer that does have indeed a bunch of machine learning AI power behind it to answer very simple questions that people often have, like, when will my food be done? How much is it going to carry over cook? Is it safe to eat? And so, I'm in the business of helping people cook better meals.
That's great. I actually have your combustion thermometer, and the reason I bought it, Chris, is because I burnt my turkey and ruined Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, and I said I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to buy Chris's thermometer because it's different than your ordinary wireless thermometer in that it actually uses AI machine learning to essentially predict the cooking time needed. So I wouldn't have to guess at it and overcook my turkey. So I'm simplifying it obviously a lot. You put a lot of technology into this little device, including AI. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I think some of this is my bias as somebody who has a formal math background, is comfortable as both a chef, but also as somebody who occasionally can do some programming. I have much better people than me doing that most of the day, but I work closely with a math team of about 6 people full-time, combination of physicists, mathematicians. And, one of the things that's really fascinating about something as simple as, heating a turkey in an oven or grilling a steak or barbecuing is, human intuition is really bad. As professional chefs, we work out a recipe and then we keep everything the same. It's manufacturing. We want tight tolerance control over how thick our steaks is. What equipment are we using? And if you do that, you can time everything just right and it will come out repeatably, which is why chefs will say, oh, well, it'll carry over 10 degrees. For them, it will carry over 10 degrees. But if you change those conditions a little bit, a slightly thicker steak, different cooking equipment. Maybe the starting temperature was different because your fridge isn't as cold. All of these things change how food cooks, and human intuition for nonlinear processes like heat transfer is really bad. And yet compute is really, really good at that. And so, what I have sort of, a big believer in was it's very easy for us to measure the world around us accurately. The technology is there now to take accurate measurements, to take them wirelessly. And what's caught up now is the ability to essentially put supercomputers in something as small as a 4.5 millimeter thermometer that can take all of those measurements. And it can do things like figure out, am I on a grill? Am I in an oven? Am I in a smoker? Am I in a deep fryer? Am I in sous vide? Classify those situations to figure out what it's doing automatically without the customer telling it. And then, all the customer has to tell it is, I would like my food to reach 130 Fahrenheit. I would like to reach 165 Fahrenheit. And we can use all of the measurements, the center, the surface, everywhere in between, to work out what is the size and shape of the food, how quickly is it cooking. And then it can pretty quickly make an accurate prediction. And It is using machine learning for that. There's some old school machine learning. Increasingly, there's some very new school micro LLMs that we're starting to use. And as we get more data, as you would expect, it's getting better and better at learning that. And all we're really asking the customer to do is stick it into the food and tell us what they want. What temperature do they want their food done to? And we give them the confidence to know that it's not going to overcook, it's not going to undercook. We do things like mathematically track all of the time spent at safe bacteria destroying temperatures. So we can do things like say, hey, your food has reached a USDA level of safety without you having to overcook it just to be sure. So, we try to use math, we try to use technology to answer very human questions in the kitchen to help people choose to cook more.
And I know it's getting smarter. One of the great things about IoT and connectivity is just you can upgrade in the field. You did that starting with ChefSteps. You're doing that now with your thermometer. So I know you'll eventually, every now and then we'll have upgrades to make this thing work better, which is one of the benefits of connecting.
About every month.
Yeah. By the way, we have some great comments coming in already. Matt Grisafi, I think he may have sold a thermometer, Chris. He says he's just telling the missus, his words, we need a food thermometer. Looks like I found it. So it looks like we should have a coupon code here for you, Chris.
Thank you, Matt.
And by the way, my comp percentage for that is like 1%, right? Every thermometer we sell today. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely, Mike.
One of the things that I remember going back to the early days of ChefSteps, you were doing some cool stuff, crazy stuff, quite honestly, for the time. I think 2017, you were enabling people to cook using a Facebook chatbot, which to me was a crazy interface. Like I was having a conversation with Facebook's chatbot saying, I want to cook my meat to this temperature. I want this level of doneness. And it essentially did it, which is a pretty heavy feat of engineering given the state of chatbots in 2017. I imagine you're looking at the technology today, what generative AI is doing to the capability of things like chatbots as interfaces. And you're probably excited at the new tools in your toolbox. Can you kind of contrast what then versus today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think I first started working on IoT cooking products. What became Joule, we started in 2013. So I've sort of got this 10 plus year view now of how, there's things that are easy today that were really, really hard then. And there's also things I was incredibly excited about as user interfaces like Alexa. We were the first appliance to really use Alexa as an interface because we had a close relationship with Amazon. And, and some of those didn't work out or they didn't get the kind of adoption that I certainly would have expected. But, one of the things, and I'll draw a contrast here and I'll bring it back to LLMs. When we first started selling a sous vide device at ChefSteps, one of the challenges you had with sous vide for mainstream customers, not professional chefs, is you're giving them the most accurate thermostat the kitchen has ever had. And the problem is no recipes are written for it. Nobody actually knows what temperature they like their chicken. Nobody knows, what's the difference between a steak cooked to 130 versus 135. And, smartphones had gotten very, very good by, say, 2014, 15. So we created an interface that I called Visual Doneness, where it wasn't just pictures of the food. It was little movies, little looping GIFs, basically TikTok is an interface where we could show people in a very human language. You didn't have to translate your desires into engineering parameters of 54 Celsius for this many minutes. We could basically show you and give you a sense of what it would be like. And when we first launched Joule, 80% of our customers used the manual interface because we had early adopters. By the time we sold the company to Breville in 2019, it was the other way. 80% of people use Visual Doneness because we'd given them a very simple way to quickly express, this is what I want. The machine's job is to give me that. Now, sous vide was nice and simplifying. That made it easier to do that. I make a thermometer now that can do sous vide, but it can do grilling, it can do baking, it can do smoking. And so, there's sort of an explosion of the number of ways people might use this product. And so a visual interface like that becomes very, very cumbersome. This is where I think LLMs and chatbots sort of come in, where we can't actually give you a prediction until you start cooking, until we have enough data to figure out what you're probably doing. And that takes about 10% of the cooking time. you would like a way for people to say, hey, I'm trying to do this. And even before you start cooking, you can give them guidance. And this is where in 2016, 17, when we were doing chatbots, the technology just wasn't there. It was cool, but it was very brittle. You could easily end up asking a very reasonable question like, I want my steak medium rare, but reverse seared. And if we hadn't specifically programmed that path, it would just fail. When we started combustion when I started working on it in 2020, 2021, Chat GPT was out, but it was really nascent. It was pretty crappy, to be honest. And so I'd kind of like, well, the technology's still not there. Fast forward to, even when Chat GPT 4 came out, I would start asking it very reasonable questions about like, I want to cook a steak. I want to do this. And as a chef, I might have quibbled with the answers, but they weren't wrong. They would solve your problem in terms of giving you guidance that was actually useful and unblocked you. And I think that's for me, that's kind of the role in technology. It's not necessarily to get you to the perfect answer, but to get you to a good enough answer to help you solve your problem right now, which is I need to cook this meal. Here's what I have. And so, as I think about where are the interfaces going to go, I think LLMs are going to play a big role. I'm less convinced on some of the generative recipes. I'm a lot more convinced on the ability for me to have an interface where I ask a question about how do I do something and I get a reasonable answer. And that's doable today. It isn't perfect, but in many cases it's good enough. And my analogy is people who have my mobile phone number who know I'm a chef, I get text messages. I'm like tech support for all of my friends around the world of how do I cook this? How do I cook that? And what I'm realizing is that's a really valuable service. And every chef I know has the same problem with their friends and family of everyone asks them, how do I do something? And it's not scalable. But with an LLM, it is scalable. And to the extent you train the LLM to your taste or say, hey, rely on Modernist Cuisine, rely on ChefSteps, rely on Serious Eats, trusted resources, you get very reasonable answers that I think can play a role. And now the question is, how do those connect to appliances? And our thermometer is one way, but there will be others.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's great. We've already seen some robots. I think the figure one is essentially a humanoid robot that is actually connecting to, I think, OpenAI for its general purpose kind of interaction skills. We've seen that Apple, I think Bloomberg broke the story that Apple is actually working on robots as they shuttle the car work. Probably a lot of work they can bring over from into automotive, autonomous cars into robotics. If we look towards the future, I know Sony, for example, has been working on this intersection of robotics and cooking for at least 7 or 8 years now. Not surprising given Sony's background in robotics. If you look 10 years in the future, you look 15 years in the future, do you think that there will be this kind of futuristic Jetson-like vision of maybe a humanoid robot in some homes doing the cooking, or will they be more kind of unitasker type of robots, like a Thermomix, very simple doing thing? Obviously, if we have an infinite time horizon, we probably can say there will be very complicated robots in the future. But where do you see this in 10, 15 years?
It won't be the Jetsons, and robotics is an interesting area because we use heavy automation in our manufacturing. We use robots. I've been in Apple's facilities, and anybody who's in sort of mass-produced consumer appliances has been around robots. And robots, when you have to do the same task over and over and over, robots can be vastly more efficient than humans, and they can be better at it. And that's where you tend to see people using it, whether it's on an automotive manufacturing line, whether it's putting a thermometer together, whether it's your dishwasher, which in a sense is a very early robot. Where robots tend to be really, really bad and humans tend to be much better is when you're always changing things, because it's actually really difficult to reprogram a robot, not just the software, but you might need to change aspects of the physical hardware to be able to do this task. Now, in something like a quick service restaurant where the menu is very fixed and there's repetitive tasks every day, you can certainly see certain types of robots making economical sense. I am deeply skeptical of the likelihood and value of robots coming into the home kitchen anytime soon, because in the home kitchen, we never do things the same. You tend to wing it, and the recipe you make today, you might never make again. And so, are you going to basically before the meal spend 20 minutes reprogramming your robot to do this new task? Like, no. And then when you say, well, okay, but it could wash the dishes, it could do these things. You're better off probably making a unitasker robot that just does that one thing,
Yeah.
like a dishwasher, for it to be economical. The other part of it is if you just look at the upgrade cycle for kitchens, it's like 10 years. Appliances have this really so appliances that are being designed and made today are going to be supported for 10 years. They're going to be on the market for another 5 to 7. So the idea that we're going to have this disruption suddenly that's going to change everything for people in 10 years, I find that implausible. I find it, there will be people who disagree with me. There will be people who light a lot of money on fire, in my opinion, to go prove that I'm wrong. But there's a reason I'm not investing there.
That's interesting. It seems though every demo I see of a humanoid level robot, the first thing they show them is in front of a table moving fruit or vegetables around. Maybe that's because the fruit and vegetables are really easy to identify. I do want to ask
picking and placing things robots are great at.
Yeah. I do want to ask you about the competency of a food brand or an appliance brand and how you would advise them to get into AI. I know that in the past you've worked with a lot of appliance brands. You're working with them now. They're integrating with your thermometer. As I mentioned briefly with Antonio, I don't think food brands are very they don't natively speak AI. When we talk about appliance and cooking equipment brands, I think that's probably is true as well. Maybe less so for commercial kitchens. They probably have a little more advanced technology integration. If you were advising a home appliance brand around, hey, AI is the future, what would you tell them to do today? And maybe how would they build that muscle?
I think I would say don't try to bring it in-house. It's, one of the things about ChefSteps and just having been in the space is the culture of software is very different than the culture of manufacturing is different, is different than the culture of marketing. And it's very hard to bolt on a software culture to an established business that has ways of doing things that generate most of the revenue. Software just looks like this really big hole to vaporize money. And when you see what it really costs to hire even B tier engineers who are actually competent in AI, like it takes your breath away. Like, cost of entry is $500,000. And really good AI people are being hoovered up by, I know folks over at Valve Software where they're spending millions of dollars a year on comp to get top quality. I mean, that's what you're really competing against. And it's not enough to have one or two. You have to have a team. Like all of this stuff happens with the team. And so I think when you look at it from can we really afford to invest in it? Can we afford to sustain that investment for 5 to 10 years just to find out if there's even a there there? And you say, that you're now talking hundreds of millions of dollars. It strikes me as probably not a sensible business plan. Instead, what I would say is, look, your unique advantage is you have technology that people would be excited to build things on top of. And, it's kind of a catnip for really talented software engineers to say, hey, it looks like my oven and my cooktop is programmable. It looks like I can do things on top of that. And so I would say you really want to take a strategy where you allow a lot of innovation to be happening on top of your ecosystem. And that means things like open sourcing your tools. And what does it mean to open source something? We're open source. That's why we've had several people build their own apps for the combustion thermometer. We've made it easy for appliance companies and large food manufacturers to integrate our thermometer and its measurements into their quality assurance and quality control. And, it isn't just enough to say, hey, we're open source. What it actually means is we've spent time writing really good documentation around how do you use our stuff. We put example code out. We spent a lot of time and a lot of money, and we need to do more of writing, here's documentation of how our stuff works. We keep that up to date. Here's example codes. Here's a starter code that you can do what you want. And we made it very permissible, about the most permissible commercial license we can do with an MIT license. And the point of that is to say, sure, it may mean that some of our customers don't use our app and sort of, they still bought our product, but they're using other people's stuff. But that's a really important signal to us that there's something going on over there that we should be paying attention to. There's something that we should basically be looking to. Do we buy them? Do we copy them? Do we partner with them? Even at our size, we're thinking about that. If I'm a big appliance company, I want to create a healthy ecosystem where lots of people are trying lots of experiments in parallel. So I can say, these are the winners. And then your choice is pretty simple: corporate development. Do I buy them? Do we partner with them? Do we try to do it ourselves and learn from them? Those are all options. But it starts with making it easy for people to build on top of what you do.
Yeah, I love that, especially given your past experience, creating an open ecosystem that makes sure yours integrates well and not have to negotiate all those complicated, I think, company to company deals for integration.
You don't have to go talk to the lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. Keep the lawyers out of it. That's one of the great things about it.
Nothing happens if you have to go talk to the lawyers.
I want to ask you one last question. Then we're going to bring Antonio back on, but I do want to remind the audience, if you have questions for Chris or Antonio, drop them into the sidebar chat. Real quickly, Jane Freeman has a great comment. She says, there is a learning curve to using new tools like sous vide. Home cooks need easy, foolproof ways to use the tool. Kind of riffing off her, I think one of the challenges I've found as I've watched this space for companies building new technology like yours is getting consumers to change behavior is incredibly hard. That's why we're basically using the same cooking equipment we used like 50 years ago. Even the Instant Pot is just a pressure cooker, right? Just with a few extra kind of ways to dial it in.
With a better interface.
But how can AI help us maybe accelerate the adoption of new technology faster? Is it the fact that it's getting more complicated, recede the technology into the background more as it gets just better?
I think it's a combination of making the complexity of the technology disappear and become more transparent, where there may be a lot of things going on behind the scenes to help the customer get to the outcome they want, where previously you would have had to answer 50 different questions in an app. Consumers won't do that. I mean, ask me how I know. We've tried. If you basically, if you change AI to the word assistant, I think that is a better way of thinking about it, of saying, look, I can get somebody like my wife, a friend who's never done something in the kitchen before. If I'm there guiding them through it, if I'm there when they get stuck, I'm there to answer their question. I can make a slight shift in their behavior and get them to do something they wouldn't have otherwise done. The problem is that isn't very scalable globally. And this is where I think AI assistants are going to provide a way of, you're not going to be able to radically change human behaviors in one step, but you're going to be able to encourage certain behaviors by giving them the confidence that they're not wasting their time, that they're going to get to the outcome they want. At the end of the day, when we step into the kitchen to cook a meal, whether we're buying a CPG good, whether we're buying a new appliance, whether we're buying a new cooking tool, we're buying it with the intent to solve a problem. I'm hungry now. I want a meal in 10 minutes. That's a CPG product that I can pull out of the freezer. I want to cook a special meal, but I just spent a lot of money on a steak. I want to make sure it's not overcooked. My thermometer does that very well. I buy a microwave and I use it for the popcorn button because I want to snack easily and conveniently. We buy solutions, and I think we've kind of stalled on a lot of those technologies because we've seen the limits of those technologies to actually solve our problem without some higher level ability to look at that, where that person is individually getting stuck, and tailor a solution right for them in that moment. And I'm actually pretty bullish that I use AI in my day-to-day workflow when I get stuck on how do I analyze this? I need some ideas for marketing. What are trends you see? They get me unstuck. And it's only getting better. That's the hard trend. So I think betting on AI as a way of getting humans to try new things is a way that you can shift their behaviors.
Yep. I'm going to bring Antonio back. Hey, we have all three of us on stage. Chris, meet Antonio, and likewise.
Hi, Antonio.
If we'll see if some questions come in from the audience, but I certainly have a question for the both of you, and it's kind of a combination. I think one of the interesting things I thought I saw as we saw more and more technology come to the kitchen was this ability to train appliances around different types of food. I mean, that's through or have cooking optimized around a specific type of food. So if I think about like a smart cooking appliance, knowing it's cooking Barilla pasta and maybe making it a lot better, that's exciting. Antonio, let me ask you, do you think this is something you see in the future, where like the products you make will be better understood by the appliances that are cooking them because of AI? Oh, are you? I think you're muted.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Yes, I feel that it will have some impact on the ability to cook. And as far as I know, like lately we did the 3D spaghetto 3D, which is like you have the same gastronomical experience of noodles or spaghetti, but it's already nested. And this is to say, because it's 3D printed, this is to say that sometimes just AI is not the only answer, but the matching of AI and a little bit of robotics or sensors, as Chris was saying, also that might open up new experiences. But to add a little bit more buzzwords, let's say, I would add in these concept of AI, sensors, or robots, blockchain and digital truth. Because in that sense, and to come back to my cultural heritage chat I was talking about before, I feel that we might lose a little bit on the certain cultural certification of an experience. So I might do a chatbot that teaches you how to cook pasta the Italian way.
Yep.
Somehow there is also the American way, and we should protect it. I mean, and I'm serious on that, and I'm Italian. So in a way, we should also work on collect differences to not join too much. I want
to recognize we have 7 minutes left in the hour. We can maybe go a little bit over, but I just want to make sure we get to the questions from the audience. And the first one of the ones coming in from Agata asks, generative AI can create recipes and give cooking instructions fit for home cooks, but what about professional chefs? Do you think generative AI can be a valid source of culinary inspiration for professionals, or maybe does it kill creativity? Chris, what do you think of that question?
It's funny. Every time there's and this is a long tradition in technology. Every time a major new technology comes along, there's a large number of people who freak out and go, it will kill creativity. I mean, it was true when Gutenberg invented the printing press. It was true with sous vide. I remember Alice Waters saying, sous vide has no soul. And it's yet, I know many, many talented chefs around the world. And the great thing and amazing thing about really talented chefs is when you put a new technology in their hand, they will figure out things to do with it that surprise you. So I don't in any way think generative AI is going to create these rigid recipes that kill all creativity in the kitchen. I just reject that on its face. It's never been my experience with technology in the kitchen. When you really are working with talented chefs, they just see the world in a different way. What I do think it is absolutely going to play a role, because a lot of the job of a professional, you can have all the creativity in the world as a professional chef. But being a professional chef isn't about just being creative. It's about consistency. At the end of the day, professional restaurants that I have worked in for years, and a big part of it was deliver the food consistently, day in and day out. What it means to be a 3 Michelin star restaurant is you give everybody the 3 Michelin star experience. That is manufacturing. That is precision. That is control. That is repeatability. And it is very, very hard to do. And there is a lot of reasons to believe AI is going to be incredibly helpful in basically ensuring that you can combine creativity with the ability to deliver that creativity as a business consistently and excellently, which is the end of the job. The real job of a chef is to balance creativity with the business needs of serving customers, which is actually what you're in the job of. You're not in the job of being creative. You're in the job of giving, of hospitality. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that, that it's all about the creativity. No, it's about serving people a meal that makes them happy.
That's great. We have just a few minutes left. And so just want to give you each a lightning round answer opportunity. And this is going to be basically final advice for our listeners listening in today. If they want to get, I guess, better tuned into what AI can do for their business, and maybe some first steps to do that if they're building either a division within a company or their own business with AI as a key component of that. What would you recommend to them? I'll start with you, Antonio.
Okay, so first suggestion, as a company, make a very diverse team from different sources and rotate fast and let them work on long-term ideas. So not be too much narrow, don't expect to be super precise, be rough, and just experiments with any chatbot you can find. It's just the experience on chatting with something that gives answers in different creative or different ways. Second suggestion, explore the open source community, because it's like 10 years ago when we as makers were building 3D printers, because the patents were the patents of 3D printing was from, I think, the 80s. So 10 years ago, the patents were off. And so we could build new machines. Now is the same time. There are a lot of young people that are working on open source projects, either on the device or on the software level, and they are willing to experiment. They need to work with somebody. So open GitHub or x.com and find for some young builder and work with them, because they know and they are seeing ways to do something. They just need somebody to talk to.
That's great. That's great. Tap into some of those young creators, maybe let kind of transfer some of your knowledge and take some of their knowledge and kind of take advantage of that. Chris, real quickly, what is some advice you give to folks?
You need to just start using it. AI as it is right now is experiential in your workflow. Thinking you can understand AI and how it's going to fit into your world strategically without actually using it to write emails, write marketing reports, analyze data, suggest ideas for recipes. That's like thinking you can learn to cook just by reading a cookbook. It's experiential. It's easy to use. My 75-year-old dad is using it to write me really long, annoying emails every day. But he's in some ways more aware of what's going on with the technology than I am, because he's playing with everything. And I think all great innovation comes out of play. It comes out of trying things. And you don't have to use it very long before you realize companies are going to look radically different in 10 years, because entire jobs are going to stop existing because you can just do it yourself with the help of an assistant, an AI assistant.
That's great. The next great prompt engineer might actually be Chris Young's father. So I look forward to seeing what he creates. But I will say, if you guys, as we finish up here, feel free to drop your contact information or how people can get a hold of you in this chat bar there. But real quickly, give each of your websites. Chris Young, where can people find you?
They can find me at chris@combustion.inc. And our website is combustion.inc.
All right. And Antonio, where can people find more information about BluRhapsody or you?
Well, BluRhapsody.com is for the pasta printed, while I'm mostly active on x.com or Telegram. I have 2 channels. I'm going to write them. Right.
Okay, drop them in the sidebar chat. People could find you there. I will say we have fans of both what you guys are doing. We had someone say, Antonio, that they can't wait to eventually get a hold of the home version of the BluRhapsody 3D pasta printer. I don't know if you're working on one of those, but if you are, we all want to buy one. Then I will. People have said that their favorite connected appliance, Chris, is the combustion thermostat thermometer. I apologize. And so I have one. I think it's great. So big fans of you guys in the chat. And thank you guys for sharing your insights about how AI can change the world of culinary and food. And for those of you in the audience, if you haven't already registered for the next event, there's a little green button at the bottom of the screen. Click it and register for the next one. And hopefully we'll see you next month. All right. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.